Good evening, council and staff. May I have a mover and seconder to call the meeting to order, please? Deputy Cabral, Councillor Fisher, that the special meeting of the Council of the Township of Springwater of June 21st, 2023 come to order at 4 p.m. All those in favor? And that has carried. Councillor, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest this evening? And seeing none, I will now call upon WSP to present the new Springwater official plan for adoption and consideration. Welcome, Mr. Bender.
Thanks very much, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Greg Bender. I'm with WSP. Also with me is Matt Alexander. We've been working tirelessly with your team of planners, Director Spagnol and Planner Russell, to get this official plan across the finish line. The finish line being very, very close. Certainly tonight or this afternoon will serve as an opportunity for consideration by council. And what we were aiming to do is just really outline sort of where we are in the process and what's changed since the last time we were with you to talk about the official plan. Matt, are you able to share your screen? We can get going on the presentation.
Yes, I'll get that going. Okay, that should be visible, yes?
Yeah, I can see it, thanks.
Great.
So just moving on to the outline of the presentation. Again, just the intent is just to provide a general overview of the project, what was completed as part of this particular project, what the key changes are, and really next steps, and answer any questions that members of council may have. So this was completed through two phases. One phase, which was done a number of years ago, including the preparation of a communication strategy. There was a number of visioning workshops that were held to really understand how the township was to grow to the horizon of the official plan. There was a growth management strategy that was prepared to understand, again, where that growth is to be accommodated. And then additional items that were discussed and analyzed in a bit more detail as part of the discussion paper. And so once that was completed, there was a public open house to receive feedback on all of that. And then there was a sort of a Section 26 meeting, which is a requirement under the Planning Act, to kick off the project and understand for members of council, stakeholders, members of the public, what items would be important to study as part of this official plan review. So we had that meeting, received a number of comments and certainly significant feedback from that session. Then I think we all know that the pandemic hit, but we looked to conclude that exercise after the Section 26 meeting, so we issued sort of the final discussion paper and growth management strategy shortly thereafter, which took into consideration the input received as part of that Section 26 meeting. We then moved into phase two, which included background reports, and those reports included a population-related employment study, intensification strategy, as well as the Bayfield Corridor study, which was essentially sort of another visioning exercise for Bayfield Corridor and how that could transition to sort of a more pedestrian and sort of even vehicular friendly corridor. We prepared a draft official plan once those were prepared, and then we had a statutory public open house. We had the final, we had a couple of versions of the official plan issued. We had the statutory public meeting, and then are here with you this afternoon to present to you sort of the final bits of the process for consideration by council for adoption. And then with that, I'm actually just going to turn it over to Matt, and he'll walk you through some of the specifics of the changes to the draft.
Thanks, Greg. We just wanted to lay out a little bit of detail here. And I think you have a staff report from Director Spagnol going into more detail than we are in this presentation. But just to give you a sense of the consultation that was undertaken as part of this program, beginning with the public visioning workshops in 2016 and the statutory public meetings that took place between 2019 and 2023. So most recently, We held the statutory public open house on February 23rd, 2023, and the statutory public meeting on March 8th. And that is where we presented the essentially final draft of the official plan prior to receiving comments from the county. So since then, that was the last version of the official plan that we presented to council. Since then, we received comments from the county, which were very specific, requesting specific changes to the text of the official plan and a few things that they wanted to see identified in the schedules. For the most part, these were editorial type comments. So they wanted to ensure that we were using clear and consistent language throughout the official plan, making sure that we had the same terminology referring to the same things throughout. So we were able to go through and make those changes. The most substantial ones or substantive comments related to the fact that we'd identified major, intermediate, and minor settlement areas, but there was no real definition or explanation of why that differentiation was important. And so we added in some language to the effect that the majority of new growth would be directed to the major settlement areas, not an intermediate amount, but the next highest concentration would be directed to the intermediate settlement areas, and the minor settlement areas would receive a limited amount of new development and growth. They had also requested some minor revisions for compliance with Bill 23. Specifically, there were some policies sort of held over from the current official plan related to site plan approval provisions, which are no longer within the authority of the municipality to impose, thanks to changes to Bill 23. There were also some policies that suggested more authority for the Conservation Authority than they currently have since Bill 23. So we made a few revisions based on that as well. I'd also wanted to mention that the previous version of the official plan, which was presented to you, was sort of a work in progress. The intent was to include the secondary plan texts for Snow Valley, Hillsdale, and Midhurst. And so this final version includes that text. It's important to note that no amendments to those secondary plans are proposed in this. Technically, I believe the secondary plans are not intended to be repealed and replaced. The secondary plans, as they were approved previously, would continue to apply, and no amendments to those secondary plans are proposed or before you. We also included recent official plan amendment text. So this is sort of like a hybrid between a new official plan and a consolidated official plan. We've taken some of the recent OPAs that have been approved, including some site-specific exceptions, which were recently approved under the Ontario Land Tribunal, as well as the complete application of the pre-consultation policies, which were recently enacted. And we added those into the text as well. So this final version of the official plan that's before you is a more comprehensive and complete version than the previous version. Plus, it addresses those comments from the county, which of course are important. We circulated the final revisions to the county, and they were able to provide some quick comments in response. They appreciated the way that we addressed their comments, but I think as a just to sort of as a warning, not a warning, but just to let us know that they may still find things that are necessary to modify. That may be related to some mapping that we weren't able to find any data to use in the revised maps. So that specifically related to some waste management facilities. So there may be modifications following this, but nothing that I would say represents a fundamental or existential kind of issue for the official plan. And just as a reminder, this is intended to conform with the current in effect county official plan, not the municipal comprehensive review, which has been adopted but not yet approved. And so once that county official plan is approved, there will be necessary further amendments to update the official plan in conformity with that. But in the interest of bringing this new official plan to fruition, we did not recommend waiting for that to take place. It should be fairly straightforward once it gets approved, but we don't have a timeline on that. So the next steps here simply include council's adoption and submission to the county for a decision. And then, as I mentioned, the county may find that some modifications are necessary. It's a best practice for the county to notify the township of any modifications that they may want to implement. And in some cases, approval authorities will ask for a resolution of council sort of endorsing or indicating that they're comfortable with those modifications before they're imposed. And so we would hope that that would occur in this case. But if the official plan is to your liking, then council may adopt it, submit it to the county. The county will review it and can approve it, modify it, or refuse it. But we think the most likely outcome is that the county will propose a handful of minor modifications and approve it with that. So Greg and I are available to answer questions if you have any.
Thank you. Sorry, excuse me. May I have a mover and seconder to receive the presentation, please? Councilors Garwood and Fisher. That the presentation from Greg Bender and Matt Alexander of WSP regarding the new Springwater official plan adoption consideration be received. Council, at this time, are there any questions or discussion on the motion? Deputy Cabral?
Sorry, just for clarification, this is towards the consultants. Are we going to be able to also ask staff specific questions relating to it as well? But don't necessarily have to do it at this time, right?
If we move on past this motion, it wouldn't be on the table. So we do have Director Spagnol here. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just reviewing, I guess it would be Appendix A, stakeholder comments and response matrix. I just wanted a bit of an explanation as to some of the terms that are used there. No response necessary. You know, reading it, I could understand why. Some of them were driven by policy. There were a few others there, and I guess my question would be, which ones find their way into the changes, and what's the basis for them finding their way into the changes? So if you could kind of go over a couple where, say, the MTO said that they wanted to see certain things done with respect to Highway 26, how it would be reflected in the official plan versus a resident who made a comment that it's not reflected in the official plan. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around that, because some of the terms really didn't identify whether it was captured in the official plan or not. So if you could help me with that, I'd appreciate it, Director Spagnol.
Director Spagnol?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, through you to Deputy Mayor Cabral. My apologies, first of all. That would have been helpful to provide just a brief overview as to what each one of the terms is meant to achieve and inform council of. Basically through the process, each category had been themed as either a category where it was a property owner that was, say, for example, asking for a redesignation request for their property. Those are instances where you've got a private landowner who's looking to redesignate lands for a specific land use. There's other aspects where there's a policy confirmation, for example, where they're looking to see where the intended process is going and where the municipality is going with that particular policy. Those types of policy confirmation comments were really for information purposes, where staff would provide the intended purpose behind the policy, but there hasn't been a formal request to change anything. And then when we've got, say, for example, policy revision requests, that's where we might have an agency who is asking for a revision consideration to the official plan, which is supported by, say, a provincial policy that's in effect. So, for example, there's a number of comments from the NVCA. There are comments from the county, which point to some revision requests that staff would have taken a look at, WSP would have taken a look at, and we would have said, okay, that makes sense because from a provincial policy statement perspective, it's appropriate to do that, given that we're dealing with a conformity exercise. The same is where we get individual property owners who may look for a policy revision request as well, where they're looking to change a policy which would, in essence, provide for additional land use approvals. I think it's important to note that we've stated from the beginning of the process that the intention behind this process, based on the work that was completed, wasn't to look at specific designation requests and redesignate properties. And the same would go for a policy revision request where it serves to extend, say, land use permissions. To point out a few, I can just pull one here from the list.
Director Stagnall, sorry, I'm just going to ask for a clarification here from Deputy Corral.
I'm sorry, I would really find it beneficial, and maybe other members of council would too, if you have an example, Director Spagnol, if we might be able to actually bring it up on the screen. I know it's a lengthy document, but if you have pointed out a couple of them, that would be very helpful in better understanding which ones moved into the process. And I certainly understand some individual landowners looking to rezone for their own specific purposes, why that wasn't put in it, because that was not the purpose of the exercise in the first place. But is it possible to bring it up on the screen so we can have a look at a couple and you can kind of walk us through?
If I can ask Clerk Ainsworth to just pull up the matrix, that'd be great. And I could probably pull one out, a couple of them actually on the first page.
Welcome, Councillor Moore. Clerk Ainsworth.
Thank you. Just to confirm, is it Schedule C, Appendix C? My apologies that you'd like me to bring up.
It would be Schedule Appendix A, please.
Thank you, Clerk Ainsworth. Please proceed, Director Spagnol.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. So the first one is dated, I believe that is November 10th, 2020, and it's a site-specific redesignation request. Basically, what the applicant was what the commenter was looking for was for wording that would allow for additional residential units and an administrative designation or government administration designation within Midhurst. Essentially, the response indicates that if you've got an existing residential use under the additional residential use policies of the official plan and the zoning, an additional residential unit would be permitted, provided that the commenter follows those rules. So under the theme where it says site-specific redesignation request, the individual requester was looking for a redesignation request. Staff responded saying it's not needed because the policy allows for it. And it wasn't included because there's already directive policies that allow for additional residential uses in that instance. Moving down the list, there's one that was dated February 23rd, 2021. It was related to the Bayfield Street corridor, and it was a land use schedule correction. And as Mr. Alexander pointed out, that in a number of cases within this official plan, it's almost a consolidation exercise where there's existing official plan amendments that have already been in place and improved. So through a land use schedule correction and through the comments received for that specific property owner, WSP went in and changed the land use schedule to reflect a commercial designation on that property owner's property because it was warranted in the sense that they had went through the official plan amendment process to do so. So that's one example there. Just scrolling down, we have, just let's see if I can find one here that. One aspect that tended to come up quite a bit was related to policy confirmation and the potential for settlement expansion. So I would go scroll down to March 13th, 2021, and this was actually raised by the mayor at the time, related to discussion about settlement area expansions with respect to Elmville. And in that instance there, it was determined that the need for a settlement expansion hadn't been demonstrated, and therefore that need was not carried forward in the land use schedules to remain consistent with the approach and the intended purpose of the official plan, really to update, refresh the policies, include all the official plan amendments, refresh all the land use schedules, and update everything to reflect more current provincial policy and county policies that are in place. I can scroll down to a couple more. I'll go down to one of the counties maybe. Or Springwater Advisory Committee. Springwater Planning and Development Advisory Committee was a committee that was brought in to provide comment and provide questions related to the direction of where the official plan was going. So you'll see in a number of those comments from that committee, there was a lot of policy confirmation looked for. There was questions about the direction that the plan was going in. One, for example, was on April 28th, 2021, which questioned the Bayfield Street corridor. It questioned the conceptual nature of the corridor and the road allowance width. And essentially the policy confirmation that was provided for that specific comment was that it was a visioning document meant to take a look at what we could do, but also providing some guidance as to what needs to be looked at to appropriately reflect the vision of the municipality to develop along that corridor. So that's an instance where it's not necessarily a policy change, but it's confirming the direction, the intent that council wanted to go in and that staff was going in with, NWSC was going in with respect to this official plan.
Thank you, Director Spagnol. Are there any additional questions or comments for staff or our consultants? And not seeing any, we have read the motion that the presentation from WSP regarding the Springwater official plan adoption and consideration be received. All those in favor? And that has carried. May I have a mover and seconder to approve the report regarding the new Springwater official plan? Councillors Garwood and Alexander, that the report from the Director of Planning regarding the new Springwater official plan adoption report dated June 21st, 2023 be received, and that the new official plan and land use schedules as presented are submitted for adoption at the July 5th, 2023 council meeting, and that the adopted version of the new official plan and land use schedules be submitted to the County of Simcoe for final approval or subject to minor modifications. Is there any questions on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? That has carried. And may I have a mover and seconder for the confirmation bylaw? Councillor Moore and Deputy Cabral, that bylaw 2023-059 to confirm and adopt the proceedings of council at the special meeting held on June 21st, 2023 listed herein be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. All those in favor? That has carried. And may I have a mover and seconder to adjourn the meeting, please? Councillors Thompson and Garwood, that the special meeting of the Township of Springwater now adjourn at 4:25 PM to meet again in the regular meeting on June 21st at 6:30 PM. All those in favor? And that has carried. Congratulations.
My apologies for being